Time for it, our Humminbird Unlock the Lake, and in this case, the lake is the playing field for the World Championship. 2021 Academy Sports and Outdoors Bassmaster Classic presented by Hook. First time at Texas's Lake Ray Roberts, the first time ever, our host city, Fort Worth, Texas. And as we take a look at this very special event, this life-changing event, and the 54 anglers who have qualified for it, I have to say, Ronnie Moore, that we came in with some big expectations. I mean, the final practice days were off the charts, according to the fishermen.
We did. We had a lot of expectations. The third time ever in Texas for the Bassmaster Classic. And Ray Roberts isn't the biggest place that we've been to in this state, but it was fishing a little bigger than expected because the lake was about 4 feet high from the conditions that anglers expected. June, you expect offshore fishing, deep water fishing, but we saw early there were still lingering effects from the spawn, still a heavy shad spawn, at least on day one of this event. And Steve Kennedy really captivated that and captured that bite more than anyone else, catching 23 pounds relatively quick to start the Classic.
Yeah, it was fun watching. He caught a lot of fish on day number one. The wind getting up on day number one, it kept progressively getting more and more insistent all day long.
Yeah, and for some of these guys, they did fish areas that they had to themselves, but once that shad spawn ended, we saw a lot of people fishing the same stretches of bushes, different baits. They really had to figure out what their strategy was going to be, and we saw that transpire with day two storms rolling in. Matt Arey is one who was in Steve Kennedy's areas for the most part, but doing it a little different, throwing a frog and flipping a jig mostly, different than what Kennedy was targeting.
Fished the west arm, the Elm Fork of the Trinity River arm. That was favored by a lot of our anglers there, and just really getting away from everybody, getting sort of inside the willows there and just doing everything the right way.
And you can see how tough it got on day two. He had 15 pounds on day one, was in the teens, caught another 15, moved all the way up to 5th place going into the final day, and that was where he would make his biggest charge of the tournament.
God, please stay on. Please stay on. Come here. Come here. Come here. Yes! That makes up a little bit. That is a beautiful fish.
Boy, Matt Arey coming so close in this Classic, so very close. Some key missed fish on the final day. He could have blown it wide open, Ronnie.
He really could have. And I mean, how long has it been since we've seen a frog factor in a Bassmaster Classic? We got to have that in June, and we got to see some really good flooded close combat fishing, especially from this guy, Chris Jones, the Oklahoma angler. His second Bassmaster Classic. His first one was over 7 years ago. This time he was well prepared for the moment, and he stayed in our top 5 the entire event, and he did so quickly off the get-go day one.
Great story. A guy fishing to change his life for real, to become a professional fisherman should he win the Classic. He's only fished 19 Bassmaster events in his whole career, which is many years.
Yeah, and Chris Jones, this is the style that he really wanted this tournament to be. Would we want an offshore deep June bite? No, not for Chris Jones. He wanted it to be bush flipping, and he proved why with a top 5 finish this week.
Oh, good. Don't pull off. Dang, they're strong. Yes. Yes. Sooner. Oh my gosh, he fell off.
Tommy, there was a lot of bushes in the water at Ray Roberts, but this specific stretch that Chris Jones was on, this region of the west side of Ray Roberts really had a lot of fish catches caught throughout the entire week. And we had a couple guys, like you said, a great practice report. Brock Mosley, one of those guys, best practice he's ever had. Did not come to fruition on day one, but man, did he charge on day 2 and day 3 to end up in a great spot.
Yeah, going from 41st on day 1 to 17th on day 2, and all the way and catching 19 pounds and 1 ounce. It was certainly the trajectory everyone wanted. He just started too far back.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that changes from day one, from the practice period. You've got 4 days of practice for the Classic, but there's multiple off days in between that these anglers kind of lose sight of their fish, or they forget what the pattern is. The fish change just slightly, and Brock had to really adjust from day one, 8 pounds and change. But like you said, day 2 and 3 jumped up big time.
He's one of the hottest fishers in angling right now, certainly on the Elite Series. 4 top 10s already this year, back-to-back second-place finishes. You don't get much more momentum-laden than that.
Yeah, we were talking about anglers that had momentum. Seth Feider has momentum this year. Wes Logan has momentum over the last few Elites. But Brock Mosley, the last 2 seasons, a lot of momentum in a positive direction. 8 of the last 15 events, Tommy, he has gotten in the top 10. And he really was excited for this Classic. He's feeling like he's coming into his own, and he had a stretch of area on the lake that we didn't see anyone else factor in. That's another key thing unlocking this lake. He was up in the east side of the lake. Not many people did very well in that region of Ray Roberts, but Brock Mosley did.
Yeah, kind of like Chris Jones. Chris Jones said, my place is it's either reloading or there's a ton of fish there. Obviously, there was a ton of fish there for Brock Mosley.
Yeah, and Hank Cherry, our eventual Classic winner, the reigning and defending now 2-time, said at the beginning of the week, if I had to hand off the trophy to someone like my roommate, Brock Mosley, who had a great practice, I wouldn't mind doing so. But it turned it out, Hank Cherry didn't have to hand it off to anyone. In fact, Trip Weldon got to hand the trophy to him one last time as the 2-time reigning champion. And for Cherry, had 2 different things going. He had that bush bite early, the shad spawn that he capitalized on, but man, that jerkbait bite on the riprap, something no one else mixed in, that he capitalized on.
Bacon. Let's go!
Bella Grace?
That's for you, sweetheart. Boom!
Of course, Hank Cherry, our defending champion, went wire to wire at Lake Guntersville about 15 months ago. And boy, a sort of a different arc to this tournament, but a lot of things in common with that Guntersville effort as well.
Yeah, out of the 6 days of Bassmaster Classic competition the last 2 years, he's led 5 of them. Cherry really coming into his own confidence-wise, and it's different. It's not the same fishery, not the same region, different times of year as well. June, you wouldn't think that a jerkbait would be factoring, but the water temperature was 75 to 80 degrees during the practice period. Really didn't get that hot until the final day of the event. So we got to see him mix in that bush pattern, flipping, shad spawn, and then that jerkbait pattern. Really made his tournament dynamic.
Yeah, 20 pounds, 4 ounces on day 1, 17-10 on day number 2. Super solid. And these bushes, adjacent to open water, adjacent to the main lake, so key for him.
One of the key times of his tournament was the first hour of day 2. That was actually 3 hours into the day because we had the 2-hour delay for the storms, but him catching a 6-pounder and almost a 5-pounder back-to-back early on day 2 really allowed him to be able to explore and fish this jerkbait pattern to get a couple extra fish, because this was one area with a lot of guys fishing the same stretches of bushes. Hank Cherry had the riprap all to himself all tournament.
And very reminiscent of Guntersville, a scene like that, riprap in Guntersville along a bridge, along the dam here. And absolutely, he just worked it to perfection. He's very, very good at this kind of situation.
Yeah, and then day 3, you wonder, going into the final day with a lead, what was going to change? Every day of this event had changed so far, and Hank really needed a good start to his morning to really find his way, but it didn't happen that way. Late day was huge for him.
Plan A and a Plan B that you can rely on. Such a valuable thing going into the final day of the Classic. One more comparison to last year's. He started this final day with a 4-pound, 12-ounce lead. In Guntersville, he started with a 4-pound, 13-ounce lead. But very different prospects.
Very rare air for Hank Cherry, going back-to-back for only the 4th person to ever do so, only the 7th person ever to win more than one Classic, and very rarely, Tommy, do you have a great Classic practice that translates to the event. Hank Cherry, one of the best practices he's ever had, and it turns into back-to-back Classic championships.
Absolutely. On top of the bass fishing world for another year, he'll do another good job of representing our sport for the next 12 months, and we'll see you at the next Classic, I reckon. So there it is, your Humminbird Unlock the Lake.